Okay, we have MLB for May the 30th, and as you can see, the odds are on the screen. We're going to start with the Detroit Tigers versus the Chicago White Sox, but we're more than likely will not refer to the opening odds in this one because they're almost identical with the current odds as they are, as this is still early Saturday morning. But yeah, we're going to go over this real quick, and we're also going to include the splits, obviously, as well as we figure out how we adjust these odds and go from there. Money line minus 132 for Detroit, plus 112 for the Chicago White Sox. Now that is actually up from their opening odds. Opening odds were at minus 124. But let's scroll down. Let's see, Detroit versus Chicago White Sox. 55% betting to 75% money. 55% betting for the Tigers. 75% money on the Chicago White Sox. Now, minus 132 here. People not putting heavy money on that. People looking to cash out this Chicago White Sox because they have been playing very well here recently. And what you want to look out for, this plus 112 must decrease in value for me to feel confident, which means must approach that negative for me to feel confident in this pick. Otherwise, I'm taking the Detroit Tigers in this one, especially since they're up from the opening. However, their splits are down slightly. They were at 28-30%, now they're at 25% money. And their odds keep increasing, especially rapidly. It really doesn't need increases early, but it is increasing rapidly. So just keep that in mind. Minus 156 here as a run line for the White Sox as an underdog at home. Over under 7.5. But let's talk about the minus 156 first. All right, 61% and 82% going with the White Sox on the spread. And as long as they're above that minus 150 threshold, I feel confident in this pick, regardless of who you go with on the ML. Over under 7.5. Minus 122 calls for the over, plus 100 for the under. 96%, 96% currently. Okay, feeling confident in this as long as it maintains above that, let's say minus 118, minus 120. It could go to minus 124 sometimes in baseball in that threshold. And as you can see, the next one goes to minus 124 in the next game. But yeah, more than likely, I'm going to join the public and go with that over only if it holds. If it does not, take that under. The under goes to that negative direction, take that under. All right, Kansas City versus Texas. Plus 106 for the Royals, minus 124 for the Rangers. That is based off of 83% going with Texas on the betting, 86% going with Texas on the money. Now, minus 124. That is going to have to hold or increase. When I say hold, it has to stay around that minus 120 plus range. Because what that does is that keeps Kansas City Royals out of the negative. If you see underdog go towards the negative direction, even though they're still going to be an underdog in this one, even though, wait, the Rangers are an underdog on the spread, but on the money line, they're an underdog on the Royals are an underdog on the money line. So in order for me to feel confident, they have to approach that negative, continue to keep approaching that negative direction. Then I feel confident with the Royals on the ML. Otherwise, I'm going with the Rangers across the board. Now let's see where the splits are for them. 30 and 37% for the Royals at this plus 180 call. That's still super high. You can cash that out alone and make decent checks. I'll go with Texas across the board. Also because of the way they've been playing as well. Over under. They need more, string more victories together. It's about that time. Over under 7.5. Minus 124 going over, plus 102 going under. And it's 97% and 94% money. I'm going with that over. Once again, I would lean towards that over, just like the last game, until I see that under approach that negative or go into the negative. Then I'll pick that under. As this currently stands, I'm joining the public and going the over. San Diego versus Washington. Minus 130 for San Diego. Washington plus 110. Scroll down a bit. All right. 70% going with San Diego on the money line, 63% money going with San Diego on the ML. Let's scroll down a bit here. Minus 130, plus 110. Okay, minus 162 here for the Washington Nationals. Let's see where they are. Okay, only 4% money. Goodness, only 4% money. All right, that's obviously going to change as the day goes on. Definitely going to be higher than that by game time. But they're an underdog at minus 162. They're above that minus 150 threshold. Looks decent. But Washington on the what determines this game is probably going to be the ML. Normally it could be the run lines, but in this game it could be the ML. Monitor how this adjusts. This plus 110 and minus 162 here. Monitor how those adjust, especially this plus 110. If that approaches plus 106, then you want to consider going with Washington across the board. If it increases to plus 114 and this goes to minus 134, the Padres goes to minus 134, then you want to consider going with the Padres on the ML and go with the Nationals on the run line. Over under minus 115 going over. Under is getting minus 105 for this game. Overs are not naturally dominating early. 93 they regularly do. But like I tell you, watch how these costs adjust. In order for me to feel confident in the over, especially since it's minus 115, minus 105 currently, the minus 115 is going to have to hold or increase. Now, let's say the total, the actual amount goes to 8 or goes to 7. Let's say it goes to 7. Then you want to consider going with that over as long as that cost. If it goes to 7, you might want to consider going with that under only if I would consider the over only if the cost holds and they drop. If they increase in value, let's say the over 8 goes to 7.5 goes to over 8, then the minus 115 would have to more than likely increase because this is going to decrease. 93% money is going to decrease as well as 93% betting. That is going to decrease. So I would have to see that increase for me to feel confident in taking that over. Because when they lower it, they're setting up something more than likely over rather than under. Because if it's under, it's under. They would just adjust the cost. But next one, Minnesota versus Pittsburgh. Minus 142 to plus 120. This is a typical game. The minus 142s hit like regularly over 65, 70 percentile, I've noticed. And this minus 178 for Minnesota. That's a very high value for the bookies. Let's see. 80%. Okay, so Pittsburgh is pretty much dominating for the most part the spread and the ML. 77% betting on the money line, 63% betting on the spread, 80% money on the spread, and 58% money on the 58% money on the ML. Now, minus 142 feels pretty confident in that. However, what you want to look out for is this minus 178, the higher negative values. They're way above that minus 150 threshold. The Minnesota Twins are, that is. And this 42%, let's say 42% and 20%. Okay, they're only getting 42 and 20 percentile. And right here. And plus 120. In order for me to feel confident, this is going to have to decrease. If Pittsburgh's ML decreases at all, go with Minnesota across the board. The only way I would go with Pittsburgh here on the spread is if this plus value goes to plus 134 or less. Plus 134 is like a little like inflection point, so to speak, where it either determines a run line for the favorite or not. Especially when it's a higher positive, that is, which is the favorite in baseball. So that's how that's going to work. Over under plus 100, under 8.5. Okay, 94 and 93% going over. Betting to money. Under is getting that minus 122. Over goes to that negative at all. Take that over. As it currently stands, I'm fading the public and going with that under because of that negative. Which means this is going to have to decrease in the negative for this to go to the negative. So, yeah, that would have to be like 118, and this would have to be minus 104. This would be minus 120, and that would have to be plus 10, minus 102. Excuse me, minus 102. Toronto versus Baltimore, minus 122 to plus 104 for the ML. Okay, so run line looks like this: plus 138 for the Blue Jays on the cost, minus 166 for Baltimore. Now minus 122, minus 166. Hold on. Minus 122 is getting, here we go, above it, 71% and 77%. And 58% and 57% of the run line are going with the Blue Jays in this game. Now, Baltimore is above that minus 150 threshold, but what you want to look out for, once again, watch how the Orioles, if they lean to the negative direction. If they lean to that negative direction, especially heavily, take the Orioles across the board in this one. However, in order for the Blue Jays, for me to feel confident in the Blue Jays pick, with 77% of the money only at minus 122, that's okay. But this plus 138 getting 58% of the money, I'm going to have to see the way that adjusts. If this goes over 60, this goes over 60 right here, the Blue Jays spread, if that goes over 60, then you would, 60 percentile of the money, that is, you would have to see this plus go to that minus 134 or less. But yeah, over under 7.5, minus 120, minus 102. Okay, let's see where I know that's 95 and 96. 95 and 96% at 7.5. Let's see, minus 120 going with that over. Minus 120 going with that over. Okay, I would join the public and go with that over only as it currently stands. They're already in that negative here, and they didn't open in this negative either. So I would feel confident in going with this over only as it currently stands. However, you see that under go to, if you see that start evening out to like minus 108 to minus 112, then you would have to go with that under in that instance at all costs. But it wouldn't make sense for them to increase and lower that cost, especially since the over is getting such a high percentage of the money. But yeah, let's go to Miami versus New York Mets. Minus 134 to plus 116. Plus 116 for Miami, minus 134 for the Marlins. Let me scroll down. Okay, they're down here. 74% and 47%. 74% of the betting, 47% of the money. Minus 134%. Feel pretty confident in that. But minus 200, one of the highest of the day, cost for the Miami Marlins on the spread. And they're only getting 26% of the money. 74% of the money is going with the New York Mets. People looking to cash this out. Which gives me, when you feel confident in an underdog in baseball, you have to feel confident in them on the ML as well. Because these are easy cash outs, these, when you do this. Those, see, that's plus 326 right there. That's plus 326 right there. That hasn't happened. It happens, but it doesn't happen too often, especially here recently. There's been a lot of way more distant games than 1.5. Basically, got to win by 2 or more, or they could lose within. But minus 1, plus 116. This continues to decrease. Go at Miami across the board. This holds or increases that minus 134 I told y'all about in baseball. You could feel confident in going with minus 200 if the minus 200 stays low. You want that minus 200 to stay low, negative 200 to stay low. That's what you want, despite getting such a low percentage of the splits. You want that to stay low on the splits. Over, under, minus 115 for the over, minus 105 for the under. I like to challenge sometimes that over, under in these instances. 96 and 96% going with the over. I would challenge that and fade the public and go with that under. Obviously, this is still early. Those are going to adjust, but I would go with that under at that minus 105. Now, Milwaukee versus Houston. Pick'em game. This is a pick'em game. Minus 110, minus 106 for Houston. All right. Scroll back up. 58% and 58% betting and money in this one for the Milwaukee Brewers on the ML. Now, they're getting plus 155 on the run line. Minus 184 for the Astros at 12% of the money and 40% of the betting. In order for me to feel confident in the Astros, you would have to go to that higher negative, even higher than minus 184. They continue to increase. Easy money right there. Houston across the board. However, since this is such a relatively, you see that plus 508, more people are going with Milwaukee here, lesser people going with Houston here. That actually could happen. This is a pick'em game. Houston goes to the higher negative. They're winning across on the ML. They're going to the or the spread. They're going to win this game across the board. But you're going to have to see this plus 155. People looking to cash that out 88%. I feel confident in Houston on that run line only as it currently is looking. And of course, the previous stuff, you got to keep that in mind, how it adjusts. Over under 8.5. Minus 115 going over, minus 105 going under. Okay, let's see what the splits are. 88 and 87, one of the lowest of the day, actually. Over 8.5. I feel confident in them as long as they're distant from this minus 105. Minus 115, I feel confident in that pick. Only as it currently stands. They start to adjust. If that negative starts to decrease, especially while the splits start to decrease, then you would have to go with the under in that one. Other than that, join the public and take that over only as it currently stands. Excuse me. LA Angels versus the Tampa Bay Rays, excuse me. Plus 128, minus 152. Plus 128 for the Angels and minus 152 for Tampa Bay. 94% for Tampa Bay, 99% for Tampa Bay on the spread. Minus 184 here for the Angels, minus 152 for the Devil Rays. Let's see. Plus 316, not super high, but still decent enough to make some money there. I always look at that just to see how high it is, and more than likely, the higher that goes, the less likely it happens. Obviously, the higher that pot, the higher the parlay goes. That is, the less likely it is to happen. But minus 152, Tampa Bay is above that minus 150 threshold. The Angels are above that minus 184 threshold on the run line. Now they're plus 152 here. The Rays are. They're at plus 152 and 99%. Okay, 94% and 99. So people putting heavy money on Tampa Bay in this one at that minus 152. They increase in this value while they decrease, and they're going to decrease at this 94 and 99%. That's why I love the previous things higher. That goes higher. That's an easy victory right there. That goes to minus anything, or even maintains this minus 152. Go at Tampa Bay across the board. But LA looks more than likely if all of this decreases. Tampa Bay decreases to minus 148 or less. More than likely minus 148 or less. The Angels decrease to plus 10. Let's say plus 110, plus 114, something like that. They continue to decrease. Go with the Angels across the board. Over under. Over is getting that minus 115. Over under is at 7 currently. 97 and 99% taking that over. Let's see. The under evens out or increases with that over. You take that under. The under increases any negative direction at all. Take that under. Otherwise, join the public and take that over. Now, Boston versus Cleveland. Plus 114 for Boston, minus 134 for Cleveland. Minus 205 cost as a as an underdog Red Sox. 1.5 point run line now. Minus 205, negative 205. That's what we're going to focus on. All right, 3%. Only getting 3% of the money currently. The highest of the day. 88% of the betting and 97% of the betting on the money. Well, the money that is on the spread, the money line and the spread respectively. And they're only minus 134. Now, we have to analyze where this has started and where this will increase from. Okay, so it's still, like I said, it's still at minus 134. Not much has changed from the opening odds. Okay, and they're getting most of the money. Guardians are going to have to get more cost, the higher cost, in the negative direction. They're going to have to get the higher cost in the negative direction. Let's say they go to minus 145. Then for sure, minus 142. Then for sure, I feel confident in Cleveland in this one. If they decrease, which means both are going to decrease in their respective directions, in as far as like improve in the negative and not improve in the positive. Let's say this goes to plus 110 and this goes to minus 130. Then you would want to consider Red Sox across the board in this one. Over under 6.5. That's probably the lowest of the day. Minus 122 going over. 98 and 97%. Okay. And they're getting that minus 122. It's hard to go against that. The under goes to that negative at all. At all, go with the under. That's simple. Okay, Atlanta versus Cincinnati. Minus 136 for Atlanta. Plus 116 for Cincinnati. Minus 144 spread for Cincinnati. Okay, scroll down. Let's see. Where were we at? Okay, here we go. 98 and 90 and 98. 98% on the money for Atlanta. They're getting minus 130. If they hold this or increase, that's an easy pick. Especially if obviously they're not going to maintain this. But if they hold this ML or increase, the Braves that is, they are going to take this one. Because these are going to decrease. 90 and 94% betting to money on the run line. Let's see. Plus 118. Minus 144 for them. So that's plus 118. That's not a relatively high spread at all. Not a high spread at all. But at 90 and 94%. Let's see. 90 and 94%. That cost is going to have to, they're only getting 6%. So that's obviously going to, if this goes above that minus 150 threshold at all, dare I say this could even decrease and they could take this. This could go to minus 142, minus 138, something like that. And the Reds could still take this spread, the run line, while Atlanta holds the ML. It looks like that could happen. But with Atlanta getting 94% and it's going to decrease, watch how that adjusts. Plus 118. Over, under, plus 100, under, 9.5, minus 122. 95 and 96% on that over. I would actually, as it currently stands, because I think this is going to go to the negative direction for sure, especially when these higher totals, they more inclined to go to that negative. So it probably might be minus 104, minus 102, minus 105 by game time. I would join the public and take that over in this instance. Okay. All right, Chicago versus St. Louis. Minus 134 to plus 114. Minus 152 for the Cardinals. Plus 126 for the Cubs on the spread and on the run line, that is. Minus 134 for the Cubs on the ML. Let's see what the splits are for this one. Okay, 69% and 75%. 70% and 88%. So the Cubs are currently dominating the splits right now on the run line and the money line. Plus 126. And they're above, St. Louis is above that minus 150 threshold. So that's always a threat. But 88%, let's see. 88% going with the Cubs at that plus 126. Obviously, That's going to have to decrease in its respective direction. Probably going to have to go to plus 118 or plus 116 or plus 114 for me to feel confident in the Cubs on the run line. With that being said, St. Louis looks decent on the run line only as it currently looks. Minus 134 for the Cubs at 75%. Okay. This could hold or even decrease, and they could still take this. But this looks pretty good for, let's see, they're getting 25%. Cubs decrease, let's see, they could decrease and still get this. But I'm going with St. Louis. St. Louis looks decent across the board. They're getting 25% of the money, and they're plus 114. But this is minus 152 at only 12%. So I would definitely go with, it looks like STL could win this across the board. Over, under, 8.5, minus 105 going over, minus 115 going under. And let's see, 96 and 96%. I would actually, in this one, let's see, I would fade the public and go with that under. San Francisco versus Colorado. Minus 124 for San Francisco, plus 106 for Colorado. Minus 1.5 at plus 112, plus 1.5 at minus 146 for the Rockies at home. Over under 10.5, minus 124 going over, plus 102 going under. Now let's see where the splits are for the Giants and the Rockies. 75%, 71% betting and 75% money going with the Giants. 77% and 96% going with the Giants on the run line. Let's see where we are here. And the over is dominating once again. 89% and 92%. Now, they like to dupe people with these kinds of games. Normally, I would lean toward that under. Lean toward that over, Over 10.5 to challenge that, by the way. Under 10.5. We're going over this real quick, the total. Under 10.5 plus 102. If this maintains, I would definitely, if they stay in single digits, I would definitely take that under. But that cost is going to have to hold or maintain for that over for me to feel confident. But at the current moment, I would fade the public. But if this cost holds, stays above that minus 120 threshold, I would take that over. Okay, so minus 124 for San Francisco gives you, okay, 96% money on the spread and 75% money on the run on the money line. Minus 128, minus 124, plus 122. Okay, it looks decent with the Giants across the board. And why is that? Because this plus 122 used to be plus 128 about an hour ago. It is decreasing despite them being at 96% on the money on the run line. So, Giants look decent across the board here. Sorry about that. And we'll move on to the next one. I'm trying to see if there's the Rockies would probably have to go that negative direction for me to pick them across the board here. They would have to go that negative. But anyway, New York Yankees versus the Athletics. Minus 146 to plus 124. Obviously, the Yankees are a favorite. Let me scroll down. Okay. 93 and 93 here. Let's scroll down past these. Okay. Minus 146 is getting 93% of the money. 93% of the money going with the Yankees and 99%. But that's regular for the Yankees. They get all the picks every game. And it looks confident when they have a low run line, plus 106. When they have a low run line, this is where you have to look at the Yankees across the board. And normally, here lately, they have been having a low run line, even in games where they didn't win. Minus 146 is getting 93 and 93% betting to money. They go above that minus 150 at all. That's easy Yankees pick. And it might be across the board. But there's plus 124 and minus 128 for the Athletics. This minus 128 is going to have to improve in value. Currently, it's stating it's only getting 1%. It's obviously going to change. That's definitely going to be around 78, 75, 74 percentile by then. So I would go with that in this instance. Yankees look decent across the board. Over, under, 9.5. Minus 115 going over. 88% and 89%. Minus 115 going over. Let's see. And minus 105 here going under. Okay, I would challenge that high total and go with that over. But they could be setting up like a game that could be 9 points, a 9-point, like 5-4 or something like that. They could be setting that up. They've done it. That's what the bookies do. But I'm confident in that over with that minus 115. All right. Arizona versus Seattle. Plus 134 for Arizona, minus 158 for Seattle. Run line, plus 1.5 for the Diamondbacks at minus 178 cost. 1.5 point favorites for the Miners at plus 146 cost. Over under is at 7 and minus 110. Okay, 98 and 97. Let's see. So it's basically lopsided when it comes to the money line and the run line. 26% on the betting, 39% on the betting on the run line for Arizona. However, 61% of the money for Arizona on the money line and 74% money on Arizona on the run line. So people looking to cash this out, this plus 134. Bettors are looking to cash that out, 61%. Plus 134 to minus 178 could happen for sure, especially since that negative 78 is so high. But let's see where we are here. See, plus 314, that's not high. It could happen. Seattle is above that minus 150 threshold, 39% and 26% here. 39% going with Seattle. And 39% going with Seattle. Okay. Minus 178 here. This actually could happen. Seattle wins the ML and Arizona wins the run line. But in order for that to happen, the 74 percentile is gonna have to approach evening out. Probably 56, 44, 58, 42, something like that. For that to with Arizona as a favorite, for that to make a little more sense. It's basically gonna have to decrease their percentage. And if this goes up in cost at all, by the way, this minus 178 goes up in cost at all, you got to go with Arizona on that run line at least. And the over-under is at 7. You may want to challenge that and take that under. Challenge that low total, excuse me. But yeah, Philadelphia versus LA Dodgers. Plus 108 for Philadelphia, minus 126 for LA Dodgers. So this is somewhat of a pick'em game, somewhat. Minus 205 for the Phillies. If you see the Phillies go approach that negative direction at all, let's say they throughout the day they're approaching the minus 104, then they go to plus 104, then plus 102, then they might go to minus 102, something like that. Then you would go with Philadelphia across the board, obviously. But Dodgers are a favorite, and this plus 168 could be a decent cash out. And sometimes they allow that every so often. 93% on the run line and 86% money on the run line for the Dodgers. 92% money line for the Dodgers and 88% money on the money line for the Dodgers in this one at that minus 126. Let's see if that has increased from the opening, because hold on. Plus 100. Okay, yeah. Philadelphia approaches these opening odds plus 100, minus 118, then you would have to go with Philadelphia across the board. But if Dodgers keep increasing in the ML, you would go with them on the ML at least. Now this is a good one. the Phillies plus 359. If you pick the Phillies on the run line and Dodgers on the money line. But yeah, strongly considering that, especially since they're getting only 14% is going with the Phillies. But in order to keep this from happening, sometimes they just want to go with this. You get -1 as a bookie. You get the -126, but you do get the give out the plus 168. Now, what you would need to know is how many people are betting on this crossing, I call it. That will determine whether, because these don't happen too often in baseball as you might think, but it should, but it doesn't. For betting reasons, over under 8.5. Over is getting at -105. Excuse me, and let's see, over -105. Okay, I would join the public and go with that over only as it currently stands. I need to see that even out toward -110 or even -108 instead of -105. But yeah, yep, that's these. I've been Scott. I've showed you what I do a little bit. Join the Patreon. Link is in the description and in the video. We will also be getting off into a lot more coming next week and in June, especially with MLB and other sports, as well as, soccer. We got the World Cup next month, and we got MLB obviously continuing. NBA Finals, NHL will continue in June. But yeah, I'll see you guys very soon. We're going to be continuing posting daily sports picks on the Patreon. And pray every day. I've been Scott. Take care.